Hi, I'm Jim Gordon, excited to be back again with another video installment for the Richmond Sentinel. Over the last few years, we've tried to present content that we hope you find educational, interesting. It's all about Richmond. Over these last couple of years with the Richmond Sentinel, we have provided content on the municipal election as well as the by-election, provincial and federal election. BC Minister of Health joined us earlier this year. We also covered the BC referendum, and we've tried when we can to cover the business people that make this city great. Somebody else who joined us earlier this year, last spring, when this building was empty, was the Honourable Mayor of Richmond, Mayor Brodie. He comes back for a year-end review next. Well, now I am joined by the Honourable Mayor of Richmond. Mayor Brodie joins us here in the council chamber. Sir, welcome back.
Well, you're welcome back. This is my council.
This is your home, I should say. Well, I welcome you back to Richmond Sentinel. You and I sat down and chatted. It seems like a lifetime ago, but it was only last March. Coming in today was nice to see some people moving around safely, cautiously. But last March there was just you and I, our producer, and our cameraman. So,
you know, we're hoping that the whole City Hall is going to open pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. We keep waiting for step 4 in the provincial plan, and every time we think that we have gotten there or we're close, along comes Delta, and then we take steps back. And then along comes Omicron, and we take steps back. So when we're going to be able to fully open City Hall and bring back all the workers into the city, your guess is as good as mine. Sure. I would have said I hope January 5th, but obviously it's not going to happen.
It's interesting, if you take that thread and go a little bit further about one of the things that you were talking about last March is trying to keep the citizens up to date on what's going on, because there are so many things changing. There's a number of things we want to do here with that, talking kind of a year-end review for you as we're here at the end of December as we film this, or mid-December. Let's go over some of the things that you want to get out to the people, because I think it's really important for the people to know that their leadership is conveying the messages.
Sure.
I want to start with something that I think a lot of communities are dealing with, and that is community safety.
Always top of mind is making sure your community is safe. And that's a real challenge in so many ways, because you can show statistics, show that you've got hardly any crime rate, you know, the whole thing, and people are safe. But all that has to happen is for a person to be personally affected, have their house broken into, or be on the end of some kind of a violent situation, and they don't feel safe. In Richmond, we have worked very hard to increase the complement of our RCMP. We said that we would increase it this term, and now we're just in our 4th year of that term. We would increase it by 51 officers, and we made that step at the beginning of this year. And so we have now increased the complement by 51 officers. We also said that we would increase the complement of our fire rescue personnel, and so we increased the complement by 36. So it's made a real difference to us in the city of Richmond, and all of which is to make everybody feel safer and make sure that everybody is included in that safety envelope.
Let's talk about one of the other elements of community safety, certainly something that has jumped leaps and bounds in the last 2 decades, and that's more cameras everywhere. You mentioned what you're doing now with intersection cameras, which is important for those people that unfortunately have something happen.
The good news is that we have upgraded the cameras at the intersections. We put in 110 traffic safety cameras. The bad news is that the Privacy Commissioner has said that we have to use a low resolution on those cameras, so that when the people are shooting at each other, which happened this year in one incident that came from the airport, and it can be important in other contexts, the Privacy Commissioner says you can't have a high enough resolution so you can identify a license number or to identify personnel in the cars. So the use has been limited by the Privacy Commissioner. Frankly, I've advocated, I've spoken to the Solicitor General. He is with us on this point, that we should not be limited in that way. I mean, after all, if we can get a search warrant, which is a vast intrusion into your personal affairs.
Right.
Surely we should be able to, through a judicial process, be able to use a high resolution image on a camera. but not yet.
Okay. I'm glad you answered that, because I've always wondered when you see things on TV or on the news, it's like, that's just too grainy. Why can't it be a little more clear? But that's interesting to know that. Let's talk a bit about something that has certainly been a big part of the news off and on since we last chatted in March, and that is mandatory vax. You guys are having a policy for city staff and councillors. A little more detail on that?
Well, it's all part of trying to get back to a fully open status with the city. The most obvious example is our city hall here, but all the facilities throughout the city. We have introduced a policy that you must be fully vaccinated, and by that we mean the 2 vaccination shots on the COVID virus. And if you're not, then you are going to not be able to work. You won't be terminated, but you'll not be able to work at the same time, so you'll be put on a special status. Now, there are discussions with the unions. There have been grievances filed by the unions. We're working through that process, but I think that that's an important part of being safe. If people are to come back to City Hall, they are going to want to feel safe, and I think vaccinations are a part of it.
That's our next category now is finances. Council approved a 3.86 tax increase. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Increased wages for RCMP, some of the other areas that you'd like our citizens of the city to know about? Well,
we started off the year with a rather large tax increase because we were increasing the complement of our RCMP by so many bodies, plus the firefighters. That's how we started the year, and we have known for a number of years that the RCMP, because they are now unionized, that the cost of the RCMP would be going up. And sure, that has happened. So there's a couple of aspects to that. There's a retroactive payment. It goes back to 2017 when they start getting the higher rates. And we're working through that. So it's a one-time payment. But more importantly, in the ongoing sense, is the fact that there's a couple percent we've had to add to the budget this year because of the increased salary positions of the non-commissioned officers. We still have a number of features to go on that whole question. We have to go to the commissioned officers, the high-ranking officers have to get their raises. And also we're going to be working through issues like whether we have to have 2 officers in every car and those kind of things, which are all going to add to the budget. So we ended up this year at a 3.86% tax increase proposed. It's now out for public consultation, but we took the same level of services. We took the costs, the extra costs after we netted out the expected growth. There's some senior government payments that have been imposed on us that for Canada Pension Plan and for ECOM, which is our dispatch service. There's the extra costs of the RCMP, and there's a 1% levy that we make every year, which is always a controversy on council. It's 1% that we put aside so that we can have money to build our facilities. And so the 3.86 is kind of a set of building blocks that gets to that number.
I want to move on to weather. As you and I were talking about before we went on camera, that if we were sitting here in July, that would be certainly one of the main topics. And it ties in, well, keeping finance part of the discussion. The capital budget includes over $12 million for drainage and dike upgrades. We're not here to throw people under the bus, and certainly hindsight is 2020, but when you're pushing for this and you see what has gone on in the last month or so in Abbotsford and the Valley, it certainly must reinforce your focus and your desire to say we have to be proactive and not reactive. Times are changing, weather is changing, droughts, severity of storms. How important then is it to get this through?
Well, it all comes down to the climate and the weather conditions and that sort of thing. If we had had this discussion in July, we would have been talking about how hot it was. We had record high temperatures. There were lots of fires throughout the province, an extreme heat wave. And so as the result of that, we had to set up a bunch of cooling centers in Richmond so people could cool themselves off. I mean, it was a matter of health and life and death. But then as we go through the year, the most recent big event shall we say, is the flooding that took place a few weeks ago. And we have had a separate levy for our dikes and drainage where we raise and spend $12, $13, $14 million per year on our dikes and our drainage system. We know that we are a set of islands in Richmond. We know that we can get flooded from the ocean, from upriver, and from the skies. So we have to take appropriate stock of that, and we've been very aggressive over the years in making our plans. And so every year, to make sure that our dikes are carefully maintained and upgraded, we're spending $12, $13, $14 million. And if you took us back a decade, say to 2010 or so, we spent over $120 million on our diking system. Again, a lot of that can come forward through grants and the like, but to upgrade the whole diking system to make sure that we are high and dry, and when we get that extreme water situation, wherever it's coming from, that we're well protected.
It's interesting because the money needs to be spent, but when you look at the alternative, which is doing nothing, we've seen the billions of dollars that are now having to be spent in the valleys.
Pay me now or pay me 10 times
Yeah.
tomorrow after you need it.
Yeah. I want to talk kind of in the same, we've gone from weather and everything to also environment and sustainability. You're very proactive on that. For our viewers watching, talk a bit about some of the things that you're working on this year and into 2022.
Well, one of the main topics would be the single-use plastics. We brought in bylaws which had to be approved by the province, and that happened over the COVID period, but we were finally able to finalize our single-use policy. What we said is we're not trying to strangle businesses as they have to make the changeover, but we do need a measure of cooperation, and we do need the businesses to come around. And I think that they have caught the message. We're giving them plenty of time. It's going to be effective in March. We brought in a bylaw which said, okay, for the plastic bags, the straws, the foam containers, you can't use those here in Richmond after March 1st.
Okay.
Now, we're still going to give a little leniency in terms of enforcement, but that's when the bylaw comes into force and effect. And I think it's now become fairly standard throughout the region, even throughout the province, although we are one of the earlier cities that was doing this when we brought it in a couple of years ago when we formulated it.
And you also, so you're going to issue a sustainability progress report to show citizens.
Yeah, I should have brought a copy of this. This is a long document, a very thick document, whereas, you know, we talk about the steps that we're taking very proactively as a city on everything from district energy to water metering and everything in between to make sure that we are, as a city, our city corporation itself, and the city as a whole is reducing our impact on the environment. Let's reduce our greenhouse gases. Let's take many other steps to preserve our environment so that we leave it in some kind of a condition for our successors that they'll want to inherit.
Before we came on, I'm sure most of the citizens in the city know you have been a mayor a long time. You took office in October 2001. You've had 20 years to kind of see the landscape change. Would you agree that as the decades pass and the years pass, childcare becomes more and more vital and it becomes a bigger concern for citizens? I want you to talk a bit about that if you could.
Okay. Childcare, if you want to look to statutes and the Constitution and all that, the province should be funding it.
Okay.
Unless it's private, it's one of those things that should be funded by the province. But the province, and I'm not trying to be critical, it's just the reality. They really haven't kept up in a lot of ways. Now, they do give out grants, and there's a lot of ways they participate, but really the amount that they invest in childcare is not commensurate with the needs. So over the years, starting in about the mid-90s, as the city has developed and redeveloped, there's been a number of childcare centers that we've been able to build in the various developments. So we're up to around 11 or 12 right now.
Yeah. Yep.
We just opened one recently. It's a childcare hub in North Richmond where there's going to be a lot of people, there's a lot of development up there. And, you know, it's 25,000 square feet. It's going to be for children of all ages, and it's going to add, it's called a community childcare hub. All kinds of services for childcare in our city, and it's really going to be needed. Now, that's not the end of the question. We don't think that we're there as far as that goes. We know of 2 more childcare facilities that are going to be city-owned that will be opening in the next 2 years. And we do expect some more private facilities to be opening up as well. But we do have to take care of the kids, and because so many of the families have both parents are working, or maybe it's a single parent family, they need real assistance, and it's up to us to make sure that they have it.
A couple other points in this category, Mr. Mayor. I want to talk about your partnership with the Food Recovery Network. Again, like childcare, people are finding it harder and harder at times to put food on the table.
We entered into a partnership with something called Food Quest, and the idea for that organization, but it's supported by the city, is that they are taking food that would otherwise be discarded, but is perfectly edible and perfectly good. It's not garbage by any means.
Certainly.
You know, you may, at the end of a day in a grocery store, they have bread and they don't want to put it out on the shelf the next day, but it's perfectly good.
Yeah, sure.
And so over the last year or two, we've been able to get from that source and to get to Food Quest a huge amount of food that is used for people's meals and used in various contexts. So it's all part of that circular economy that we talk about, where you're trying to make sure that you are reducing the amount of waste that you're generating, and make sure that if it doesn't go to your primary purpose or source, it goes to a secondary source, which is perfectly good. It's not giving people garbage. It's absolutely perfect food, but it just may be excess to your requirements.
Sure. Before we leave this category, one last thing I want to ask you about your joint, another partnership, your joint campaign with the RCMP about hate has no place. There certainly has been a rise in that. No one would deny that over the last year and a half. Talk a bit about the partnership that you have with the RCMP.
Well, of course, they are the contract provider for our police. And with COVID, there seemed to be more open racial incidents. I mean, when you look at them, they're just almost inane, but they are very hurtful and they are unnecessary, and we don't want them. We want to stop it. So between the city and the RCMP, they launched a campaign called Hate Has No Place. And there was a series of education, there was posters, educations, discussions, and various initiatives so that people would be more aware of what they are saying and try to avoid those kind of racial incidents. And if enforcement is needed, then it would be provided one way or the other as well. So we had a couple of situations where racially motivated incidents happened. They were recorded by people with their cell phones. It went on social media, and there was a real blitz to basically embarrass the people. Sure. And appropriate apologies were made in all the cases.
When you and I talked last March, of course, the discussion was always about that, and we said this at the beginning about things changing. You have to adapt. This is this, and then 2 weeks later it could be that. In terms of businesses in 2020 and 2021, tourism is a big part of your city. Talk a bit about the economic development. I was happy to see that permits for patios and things like anything you could do to help businesses adapt in 2021 and 2020. Talk a bit about that economic development you're helping to keep the businesses moving.
Yeah, part of it is just an evolution. As we get better at things and we have technology to help us out, we can get on the move. Part of it was COVID and the challenges presented by COVID. So just on the evolutionary side of things, we have more technology that is helping people to stay connected. We're enabling the businesses to get most of their permits online instead of having to come into City Hall and reducing the period of wait and that sort of thing. We've also developed a business resilience program where we have people talking and presenting about how changes can be made to their businesses, and so much of this is done in conjunction with the Chamber, of course. We also have what was a temporary patio program with the idea when COVID first started up, getting the restaurants predominantly, but other businesses too, enabling them to be on the patios and on the sidewalks in front of their establishments so that they could preserve the kind of clientele that they had. That temporary patio situation still exists and has been extended to the spring. And in the meantime, we're studying how to make it a permanent program, not just a temporary patio program.
Mr. Mayor, we've talked a bit about your partnership with the RCMP, and of course we talked a bit about your partnership in the Food Recovery Network. There's so many other things that you're doing as a city. Let's talk a bit about serving hundreds of thousands of meals to those people in need, especially during COVID, and a number of other partnerships you have going on at this time.
So the city has developed a partnership with the Food Recovery Network. The idea being to take food from various establishments where they have food excess to their needs that is perfectly good. It's not garbage food, it is perfectly good, edible, servable food. Take that and get it to the people in need. So for instance, if you have a grocery store that has bread left at the end of the day and they don't want to put it out for the next day, it's perfectly good for a long period of time. Take that food and get it to people who can really use it. And by doing that, we've engaged 60 businesses in this food recovery network, and as a result have, through the year, been able to serve hundreds of thousands of meals to those in need one way or the other.
Of course, another part of the equation is places to sleep, shelter. You have done a lot to make sure you have partnerships in place with Salvation Army, the Minaroo Senior Centre. Talk a bit about that part of the equation.
If you go back to when I was first mayor, one of the big changes that has taken place is the number of homeless that are on the streets in every city.
Sure.
And Richmond is no exception to that. And so we've entered into a number of partnerships and established a number of locations to cater to people who have no homes. One of them is across the street at Brighouse Park, right across the street from City Hall, where at the pavilion we have a winter program to make sure that people can have showers and change their clothes and just have some real basics that they would need at this time of the year. And also, for the actual sleeping arrangements, we, on the cold nights, we will open up the South Arm Community Center parts of that so people can have a place to stay overnight. We also, besides the permanent shelter that we opened up in the Ironwood area, which has roughly 40 spaces, we opened up another shelter in the old senior center, which is going to last for another few months. And that's particularly because of people with COVID. I mean, think about it. You've got COVID and you're on the streets. How do you ever recover from that? So they need a place, and that's a good place for them. Now, we've also taken the time to envision the long term, where we're building a bigger space of a permanent sort on Bridgeport, and that's going to take the place of the modular housing that we have on Alderbridge, but also we're developing other concepts for emergency shelters and that sort of thing. So it's something that we are always thinking about and acting on.
Keeping within the same category, really, with planning and development infrastructure to move into next, talk a bit about another thing that people are concerned more and more with as the years go by, and that's affordable housing. Like child and daycare, it's something that's probably front and center for a lot of families and couples. You talk a bit about what you guys are doing and what you see going forward.
Yeah, when you talk about housing in Richmond, the word affordability or affordable is it's a relative term, because I would say to buy a house is is hardly considered to be very affordable for most people. In every development of 60 units or more, it was 10%, and now 15% of the units have to be devoted permanently to low-end, we call them low-end market rentals, where people with lower incomes, less resources, have more affordable rents. And so over the years, we've been able to open a couple thousand of these units at various places in the city. But that's the one thing we did during the year specifically, is to say instead of 10% affordable housing, it's now 15%. And if it's a smaller development, then cash is paid in lieu of giving over those units.
Talk about the plans for Lansdowne Centre. It's been there for decades. Of course, the SkyTrain right there. Both sides have various levels going on in terms of construction. What can you tell our viewers out there about the plans for Lansdowne?
Well, for a number of years, the plan has been afoot to redevelop the Lansdowne Centre. And the first step to doing that is to take the official community plan and to make the modifications for it. And we managed to get through that process this year.
Okay.
Very simply stated, there's going to be 5 different areas in this 50-acre site. Each area is going to be developed as a phase and will go through a rezoning process. But in addition to that, there's some north-south and east-west roads. And also you have 10 acres of park right in the middle on Lansdowne, plus more acreage for a linear park along Lansdowne Road.
Can you talk, before we move on, about the Steveston Highway interchange? A little bit about that.
Well, again, it's an old chestnut, the George Massey crossing. Mm-hmm. For many years, the government of the day wanted the big bridge, and Richmond City Council was never in favor of that. Long story short, now the proposal is for an 8-lane tunnel. Mm-hmm. The first phase of that project, because it's the main project for the tunnel, is in the planning stage. They are designing and planning and will be going ahead with improvements on the north side of the tunnel, the Richmond side of the new crossing, mm-hmm. and specifically at Steveston Highway. So again, simply put, instead of having one overpass over Highway 99, it's going to be twinned. So there's going to be 2 overpasses over the highway. And we've spent a lot of time working with the province, and they're close to finalizing their plan as to what they do to improve the whole traffic flow and to get it moving as the first part of the bigger project.
We talked earlier about one of the things you're assisting with in terms of business, tourism. It's a very big part of Richmond, yeah. Lots to offer. Can you talk a bit about arts and culture? I include tourism because I think that's a big draw. Richmond is certainly no stranger to events, festivals, that kind of thing. In a day and age where COVID, as you said, is here, could be here a lot longer, what are your thoughts on that necessity, an essential part of what makes Richmond Richmond?
Well, and of course, when you talk about arts and culture and various kinds of events, you're talking about an evolution of a situation, whereas it used to be you would put on an event and invite thousands of people to come and enjoy it. You can't do it. You can't do it on the same scale, and to the extent that you can do it, have an event in person, there has to be distancing and it has to be done safely. And a lot of all the events is going to be virtual. So a couple examples would be the Doors Open project. Mm-hmm. We have a celebration each year. We had this year the 14th annual Doors Open event. And that's an opportunity for people to go all over the city and discover places of interest in our city that they would never probably go to in any other way. Could be some of the religious facilities, it could be some of the artist studios, it could be some of the city facilities, everything, from the Oval to the Britannia Heritage Shipyard, all kinds of things are showcased there. Mm-hmm. And the bigger celebration is something called Culture Days, where we have for a number of weeks, a number of different cultural events. We've always been recognized for our part in Culture Days.
Right.
This year we were named amongst the top 10 right across the country for our participation in Culture Days. And for cities of our size, we are ranked in the top 5. So it's been very, very successful. And all of the events that we have, that we put on or that we're in partnership with, they always have a good draw and people come out and they enjoy themselves. They're always family focused and people have a good time.
One of the things, and I always equate this back to probably in America, the first president was kind of the modern media age, and that was FDR, who would have these fireside chats every Sunday night. And I bring that up only because it was comforting to the citizens. And I allude to an obscure reference, but it comes back to what you guys are doing, because today, people want to know that their leaders are talking. That's part of you talking with us today. You're very proactive when it comes to getting the word out through social media. Let's Talk Richmond, refreshing of the website is coming in 2022. Talk a bit about, in the 20 years you've been there, social media is not a thing 20 years ago. How important is that in your mind to make sure that you reach everybody in a variety of different ways?
I think it's immensely important that we effectively communicate with the population, whether it's telling people about the applications of a land use variety that are coming up at various meetings or public hearings or something, or they can get in their input on the tax situation or anything else that is coming up of note. We consult with the people all the time, and the opportunities, they're all the way from just public consultations in the usual way. Now, again, COVID has come in here, and so it's usually done on Zoom instead of people coming into this room and giving their public input. But still, the idea is the same. The people are able to communicate their ideas with the city. So we have Let's Talk Richmond, which is people can talk to us about anything they want. We'll have specific consultations on topics of interest. We will have the social media at work, and people certainly know how to send us emails and letters and telephone us.
Well, I appreciate you doing that. Again, it's Let's Talk Richmond, and a refresh of the website coming in 2022. And thank you for letting me get one historical reference in there, by the way.
There you go.
Let's talk a little bit more as we get near the end of our discussion on planning and development and infrastructure, a very important thing. We've talked a bit about that, but let's talk more about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, a couple of things that come to mind when you're talking about the planning. One of the important aspects is people want more transportation choices when they are going around Richmond. Mm-hmm. And so that leads us to have more bike paths. We're developing our bike paths each and every year, taking money to do that. We want the pedestrians to have freedom to walk around freely and safely. One of the interesting ones is the scooters. You've seen these e-scooters around occasionally. And so we are part of a provincial pilot program where they are working with a number of the cities in the province to take a look to see what kind of infrastructure is needed, what kind of rules and regulations need to be put in place. Mm-hmm. Because really it's really just like the bicycles now. There's very little of a structured nature.
I agree. They're on sidewalk or on the road, they don't know where they're supposed to be.
There are certain basic rules, but I think that they want to know more about what requirements there are, what regulations there are. And there's another one that's of interest, though, for the people who drive the cars, of course, and that is River Parkway. People will remember that many years ago, well before the Olympics in 2010, mm-hmm. the city bought the old railway right-of-way, which goes right from Sea Island Way right to Steveston. And so we've done a number of things with that. First of all, we have the railway corridor, which has been We put down asphalt, and pedestrians, cyclists, rollerbladers, scooters can go on there. But we've also extended what is called River Parkway, which basically goes from Gilbert to Cambie in a northeast direction. And that takes the traffic off the old River Road, which was actually right on the waterfront. So it's a very effective and efficient transportation corridor between those points. People who go along it for the first time are surprised what the enterprises, the businesses, the buildings that they go behind, because they never have thought about Richmond in that way. And so it's been very effective. That parkway will be extended as development extends north of Cambie, and will make a very efficient corridor. The other side of this, and one of the reasons we wanted to develop that old railway corridor was because there is a plan afoot for a 40-acre park extending northeast from right along the water, right along the old River Road, right from the Dinsmore Bridge to about halfway to Cambie. And that's going to be a big green park for the benefit of everybody, and particularly the people in the city center. So the land has been assembled. We've been assembling quite a lot of land over the period of time. We don't have it all, but we're getting close now. And we're hoping that by 2024, 2025, we'll be able to develop that park. So I bring that up in the context of the River Parkway because it's important to have another vehicle corridor, so that when to the north of that, to the river, when the park is developed, they'll just take down the buildings and they'll develop right to the dike, and there won't be a road between that park and the dike. It's going to be a really nice feature.
Lots we have talked about today, sir. I yield the floor one more time to you to wrap things up, looking back at this year, and anything else you would like to add for the Richmond viewers out there?
Well, we could probably talk all afternoon, about the various facilities, programs, initiatives that we've taken as a city. But I think that we have given people the flavor of a lot of what we have been doing as a council. Notwithstanding COVID, notwithstanding the natural situations, I think that our city council has moved along fairly effectively in addressing the various needs of the people of Richmond. We continue to grow as a city. The plan has always been that we will densify in the city center area, plus along the arterial roads where the developments will be close to transportation, public transportation. And that has been the plan for 25 years, and that continues to be the plan. So we're being very proactive about it. We've got lots planned for 2022. It's going to be another banner year, and we're looking forward to it.
Well, I appreciate you having us here to your office again, sir. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. 20 years in office, how long do you keep going?
Oh, I don't know. We'll see when I turn 100 or something like that.
Okay. Mayor since October of 2001. Always a great pleasure to talk to Malcolm Brodie here in his office at City Hall in Richmond. Thank you for joining us on this Richmond Sentinel Chat.
My pleasure.
Thanks.